More now on our top story. Greater options on the cards for people looking for a place to live in Singapore. More state-owned buildings will be converted to co-living arrangements, with a tender for a heritage shophouse in Little India getting the ball rolling. But what exactly does co-living entail? Well, first of all, co-living spaces promise communal living at a more affordable rate. They offer shared communal areas like a gym, but private rooms for each resident. Now, such spaces are often fully furnished and are usually found at accessible and convenient locations. Now, rents for a single bedroom are typically not more than $2,000 a month. But with rental prices rising, it's no surprise that co-living spaces are seeing significantly higher demand from both locals and foreigners. And with short lease periods, they also appeal to those seeking temporary housing and who are keen to socialize and network. So who exactly are the major players in this space? You may be familiar with names such as Colly Woo, the Assembly Place and Bespoke Habitat. They are the three largest operators in Singapore, accounting for about half of the country's total co-living spaces. Well, let's dwell a little more on this with real estate analyst Lee Sze Teck from Huttons Group and Petrina Yuen, a postgraduate student who is a co-living space enthusiast. Well, I'm just going to kick things off with you first, Sze Teck. Let's just talk about pricing. You know, it could be around $2,000 or so, they're saying. Just how affordable is this for, say, the Singaporean millennial, somebody like Petrina? And is the pricing justified based on, you know, the community experience and all the shared amenities?
I think the rental-wise, if you're just looking at a room, it can be much more affordable compared to if you were to go and rent from a private landlord. And moreover, when you look at a co-living space, they offer you things like even housekeeping on a weekly basis. And of course, communal spaces for you to get to know more people and stuff like this. And some of them will have different activities as well. So for this kind of experience and the value you actually get, I think the price that they are actually charging is actually pretty competitive versus the private market side.
Mr. Lee, earlier on, Oteli was, or rather, we were looking at a report in which our reporter was talking about these on Hindu Road, the shop houses there being converted into co-living spaces, and the price she quoted was $3,500. And she specifically said these are targeting academic staff of nearby institutions and well-to-do students. $3,500 is a lot of money for someone who isn't earning yet, assuming as a student you are not. So just so that, I don't know, I can meet a few people for drinks or I can talk to someone, surely that's not worth this kind of money.
I think some of this is also in response to the renters in the private market, which actually have increased quite a fair bit also, just like in 2022, they went out more than 30%.
So if I could just really cut that short. So it's got nothing to do with communal living. It's got to do with the fact that it's relatively affordable compared to other kinds of housing.
Affordability is definitely one. The communal side is another part which they can offer, which you don't actually get if you were to live on your own.
All right, and just before we get to you, Petrina, let's just take a look at where co-living spaces are situated. Well, a report by JLL shows that many are actually found in the central region, which is well connected and offers easy access to amenities, transport links, and workplaces. River Valley, Geylang, and Little India in particular are popular due to their proximity to the CBD. And they also feature vibrant local culture, food, and entertainment scenes. Well, Petrina, I'm just going to bring you in here. Well, location seems that seems like a key factor for co-living. So aside from that location, let's just talk about whether it's how much it costs to rent the place. What are some of the other factors, right, that that you actually think about, that you think co-living is actually the right decision for me?
So I think there's two main factors, right? One is affordability. I think it was right to address that really in Singapore there's a legitimate need to provide alternative housing options, right? especially with the current rental market and, all kinds of policies where people below 35 are not eligible to BTO and resale, right? So these two factors are actually some of the major factors, not so much the wining and dining and mixing our friends, although that is a nice alternative, but including, I think what you mentioned, location is also a huge factor because, for example, a lot of the mature estates, have been priced out, and for the majority of Singaporeans, housing affordability is really a big concern, especially for my age group as well.
All right. Your age, you are a postgraduate student, and even if you say do PhD supervisions, there's not a lot of money in that either.
Absolutely not.
Right, there you are. So what are the options for someone like you? You don't have a huge fixed income.
Yes.
You can either pay $3,500 for the privilege of living in that co-living space, or what's the average price of, say, a single room in a flat that's not too far away from where you have to go to, or as opposed to a hostel? How do the prices stack up?
So, firstly, I want to know I'm not a student in Singapore, but I think it's really important to address, especially people in my age group who are maybe are at their first jobs or recently graduated. The options in the market are really quite limited, as you said. Even renting a HDB now, it's really quite an expensive endeavor, right? So sometimes you have to decide between living at home, right, which is, I think, what a lot of people do. But let's also acknowledge that that might not be an option for a lot of Singaporeans who have maybe many factors to why they cannot continue living at home, right? So again, there is really a limited choice on where we can live, right?
Okay, well, we're going to pick up on that in a short while. But let's just first take a look at the big picture once more. Now, a report by JLL says that there are at least 20 active players in the Singapore market and about 9,000 co-living rooms as of June. And it is expecting another 2,000 units to enter the market by the end of this year. And going back to you again, Sze Teck, well, it seems like, they are repurposing more and more of these houses, providing more options for whether it's Singaporeans or for foreigners and expats. Why do you think that, as much as we've talked about that the pricing is still relatively high, that there is demand for it? Why is the popularity picking up now?
I think the popularity, that aspect, the demand comes from two sources. One is transient, that's temporary, because people are affected by some of the construction delay. They cannot put down an exact date as to when their new homes will be completed. And going into co-living gives them that flexibility to actually extend it by a few months rather than going into a long-term contract of 2 years. The other, of course, is the other group that's more permanent. It is now made up of more of the locals as well as the foreigners. Some locals, like Petrina, they are actually open to actually living in a co-living space, even though they are maybe just looking not as a long-term thing, but after a while they may go and still buy their own house as well. So these are the demand that's actually coming in. And of course, the other definitely is the rents in the private market, which has went up, which has resulted in some affordability concerns for some of these foreigners who are actually working here. And co-living actually gives them another alternative, which they are actually looking towards favorability now.
We're looking at this from the point of view from someone renting, so is it affordable? But from the point of view of, so for example, Eco Energy, which is the construction company that got the land tender to develop those houses, the co-living spaces on Hindu Road, for them, they must think it's a good deal so that however much it takes for them to convert those very quaint looking, but they are probably very old. And I don't know how much they want to do it so that it keeps in the spirit of the times. Is it like revamping an old house and trying to keep that old spirit? If they do that, that will cost even more money. Does it make sense for them to be even doing this rather than building from scratch?
I think the current business model in Singapore don't really favor build to rent. A lot of times I say if you're a developer and you want to build anything more than 4 units, you need a license from the government, and then you are subject to the additional buyer's stamp duty when you do so, because you are doing residential usage. So it is not viable for them. The other is that they will go into the private market to try to buy some of these commercial properties or even rent them after that to refit them to make them into co-living spaces. That is the alternative that they have on hand.
And Petrina, I'm just wondering, like imagine like living, like co-living with other people in very close proximity,
Yes.
where, you have to share all the facilities, from the toilet to the kitchen, to the gym and all of that. It seems like when you really want to switch off and not just, some days you just want your me time and you don't want to talk. I mean, like in a co-living space, is that a consideration as well, where it might be a bit off-putting, or you think it is something that you're open to?
So I think it really depends on the iteration of co-living, right? Because I think that bracket term, there's so many iterations of how it can be done. So in some instances, yes, you get a lot more privacy, and in some instances, you're sharing your living room essentially, right? So I think that's also dependent on the tenant on which kind of co-living situation that they would like to develop. But I would obviously, try to recommend that developers consider that it needs to provide adequate privacy and a standard of living that people would find acceptable for that price that they're paying for.
Oh, thanks both for coming in and sharing your views with us this evening. That was real estate analyst Lee Sze Teck from Huttons Group and co-living space enthusiast Petrina Yuen.